Turn on your sound, turn on your sound, turn on your sound. Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Camille from Paleo Kitchen TV, and we are about to have a mind-blowing conversation, no pressure, Erika, about how to customize your paleo diet for your unique genetic type. My guest is Dr. Erika Gray. She is the founder of a revolutionary company called Toolbox Genomics. And I guess first I'll just say hi because you're there.
Hi, Camille.
Welcome. And now I want to tell you a little bit about Erika. I may not read this whole thing, but it is like super awesome. And maybe I will. We'll see. So Dr. Erika Gray, PharmD, co-founder of Toolbox Genomics, has a PharmD from UC San Francisco and works as a pharmacist at a level 1 trauma center in both the inpatient pharmacy and emergency room. Her experience in the emergency room of seeing the terrible manifestation of chronic disease and in helping patients understand their biomarkers in relationship to their health paved the way for the co-founding of Toolbox Genomics. After being diagnosed with endometriosis as a young woman, she reversed illness through diet, lifestyle, and supplements, and became fascinated by the nuances of biochemistry and genetics, and then pursued a bachelor's degree in biochemistry. Through her journey, she found alternative medicine and conventional medicine sometimes seem to be at odds with each other. But as a compounding pharmacist with whom she worked always found a way to explain and reconcile both modalities, which I find fascinating. Over the past 10 years, she has followed in her mentor's footsteps, making clinical recommendations and helping patients translate their biomarkers into actionable items utilizing a variety of means: supplements, diet, lifestyle, and medication. Most recently, Dr. Gray was accepted to present at Health 2.0 and completed the National Science Foundation I-Corps program at UC Berkeley Haas School of Business, a program focused on helping entrepreneurs validate and commercialize their ideas. That's awesome. Additionally, she was invited to give presentations at the Microbiome and Nutrigenomics Summit in the Bay Area. She is a California native, resides in Oakland with her husband, 2 kids, and a menagerie of animals. What a cool word. Wow, you're so fancy. You're not inspired by yourself hearing all that?
No, I am. I was thinking about that. Wow, this is fun. And not to add genetics to the end of all the different modalities.
Yes. Wow. Well, it is my great honor to interview you today, and let's just hop right in. So for those of you who are joining us live, if you have any questions, please ask your questions in the chat box. And if you're just joining us, say hello and tell us where you're joining us from. So I have a whole bunch of questions that we had sort of talked about ahead of time, but let's just start with the beginning. What is this? What is genetic testing, and how can it help somebody lead a healthier life?
So genetic testing right now, I think, is really, it's this new paradigm that we're focusing on. Because we used to think about genetic testing as prenatal screening or cancer screening, but now we're really utilizing it as a health tool. And so we're looking at changes in our DNA, and it's just in one of our base pairs. So your DNA is kind of a set, but you get these little changes, and it's just one base pair that changes. And you get this one change in your base pair, then it codes for different things. So you have enzymes that work better, slower, it codes for other genes. So when we look at this from a health perspective, we're really interested in what are these little changes in our base pairs and what does that mean for our health? And for some of us, it means we get an added advantage because we can digest lactose. And for others of us, we can't. So we need to support that enzyme. So I should really say that this doesn't mean that this is doom and gloom and that we have these genes and oh my gosh, my life is coming to an end. But it's so exciting because we get all this fascinating information from it about us. And now we have these tools of what can we do about it. So genetic testing has really evolved, I think, from a lot of screening, from very concerning diseases or diseases that there's oftentimes no cure for, to really honing in on how do we interact with our environment and how do we interact with the nutrition that we consume.
Right. Yes. The whole conversation of epigenetics is so fascinating, because it feels like such an old school conversation to just say, well, this is what happened to your parents and your grandparents, your great grandparents, so there's not much you can do. When in reality, there's certainly information to be taken from that, as your test shows us, but that's just it's a beautiful piece of information, and how we live our lives day to day, how we eat, how we care for ourselves really makes the biggest difference, we're finding.
Exactly. And so I think it's an important differentiator to point out that for some of our genes, if you interact with your environment a certain way and it affects other genes, and those genes can be passed on to your children, then yes, what I do today or what I did before I got pregnant may have affected the future of my grandchildren. Right. But then there are other genes that you affect it immediately on the spot. And then those particular genes are going to be the ones that are not necessarily going to be inherited. So This is an important differentiator, so that you don't think that, oh my gosh, everything is inherited or everything is not inherited. It's this balance between them.
Right. And what, I was going to ask this question later on, but I think for the sake of so many of just my own personal community and myself, this whole conversation about the keto diet is so ripe right now. And it went from, there are a lot of fads. And now I'm not of the belief that the paleo diet is a fad. I'm like sort of in between about keto. I think that it obviously serves great benefit to a lot of people. Craig just showed me a picture of a friend of ours who has lost 170 pounds on keto since the last time we saw him. Like I have the chills.
That's amazing.
Yes. Like I just saw this picture of him. He was morbidly obese. And now he is not. And it's happened over a couple year period, but you can't deny things like that, or the way that keto helps for some people. I know personally, I've tried keto and it has not worked for me. And now when I look to my Toolbox Genomics, I have a bit of a better understanding as to why. But can you please clarify this for us?
Sure. So I think because I was thinking about this in advance of our talk, that I think a lot of times these what we would call a fad diet, we really want to think of it as a therapeutic intervention. It's something that you use because you have a very specific goal in mind. Usually weight loss is the primary thing in there, but then for other people, it's bringing down blood sugar, it's improving cholesterol, improving blood pressure. So we often use these modalities with diet to get an end goal. But the problem is that we think that, okay, this is the diet, it worked, and this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. But that's not how we evolved. And so if you think about the seasonality of our food or the abundance that we would have, it's winter time right now. There's very little fruit on the tree. If you go to the farmer's market, it's persimmons, citrus, I think apples. That's it. There's no bananas. There's no pineapple. And so I think we get into this mindset of we say, okay, this is the diet. This is what I'm going to do. And this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Instead of saying, okay, this is great. It worked for me, or it didn't work for me, because I've definitely seen a lot of people that keto doesn't work for. Keto didn't work for me either. And I have definitely seen that it works better for men than for women.
I've been wondering that too. That has to do like with our hormones probably, right? And what we need to build hormones as women.
There's that, but then there's this whole other aspect of leptin. So if you are leptin resistant, so leptin is that hormone that signals that you are hungry and it goes up, and then ideally you eat, and then the ghrelin comes up, and then the leptin comes down, and then you feel full and you walk away. But if you are left in what we would call resistant, I mean, it's just like being insulin resistant where the cells can't hear it, you're going to keep eating. And so then what's going to happen is that you keep eating all this fat thinking it's a great thing, but it's actually not helping you. It's not benefiting you.
It's still very calorically dense.
It is.
It's really hard it can be hard for your organs to process for some people.
Exactly.
Right.
Right. And so then you have to ask yourself, well, can I actually handle all of this fat genetically? Because there are some people that if you don't have the right coding for the right enzymes or the right transport material or the transport cars, then, I mean, it sounds wonderful in theory, but it's not doing the job. And all of a sudden you see your cholesterol levels going through the roof. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what's so hard.
Right. I had all of my cholesterol done after my son was born, like a whole micronutrient panel, all of that stuff. And the first thing, and the cholesterol thing's a confusing conversation anyway, but the first thing they said was, well, you've got to lower your cholesterol. And I just ignored them. But then because of all of the alternate information about cholesterol we're hearing, but later on, when I did try to do keto, I had like a short window of time where I felt good. Yes. But it did not last very long. And so I stopped.
Yeah. And actually, I have found that for a lot of women, myself included, that bringing in some of those starchier carbs, for example, like sweet potatoes, even some potatoes, if you can tolerate nightshades, they really do seem to work better. And again, so there's a couple things that I think are really important to keep in mind. There are certain genetic markers that are going to dictate how your body deals with cholesterol. So there's something called ApoA2, which if you happen to have it and you eat a bunch of high-fat dairy, your chances of gaining weight go up because that's just how we've been blessed with that. So if you know that, then you don't want to start stuffing your face with all kinds of cheese and ice cream, even though, there's some great studies that have come out that have showed that for some people, ice cream might be better than fruit. Again, did you see that study out of Israel? It was fascinating. They put 24-hour glucose monitors on people, and they looked at their microbiome, and then they looked at what they ate and their activity level. And they were able to see these patterns. And for some people, fruit was fine. Right. Their blood sugar went up and it came down. For other people, it went up and it stayed up. Right. And so actually ice cream was a better choice for them.
Because there was the fat, which sort of helped to blunt that.
Well, yes. And they could probably metabolize the fat and it helped bring their blood sugar down. So they actually were able to create an algorithm.
All of that stuff is so interesting to me. But it's also like, I get why people are so confused. I'm still confused, and I have been focusing on this. I don't have the training that you have, but I have been doing tests on myself for 15 years, tweaking my diet, seeing what works, and to the point of the post I did in one of our private communities the other day. Even the thing that was working for me at one point, like, okay, now this is the thing I do. This works for me. All of a sudden, I'm not having as good of results as I was previously having. Like for me, it had to do with drinking raw, fresh pressed juices and eating a lot of salads. And those were the things, along with eating paleo, that really helped me at the beginning. And I don't know, I mean, my body is in a different place. Of course, I've had a child now, but also living in a different environment. And so talking to, and, Chinese medicine principle, like they don't talk about detoxing, or they tell you to cook all your salads. So Chinese medicine people are not interested in like raw vegan, all of that stuff anyway. But the first thing when I went and had them analyze me was, okay, Camille, you've got to stop drinking green juice and eating salads. And I was like, excuse me? Well, that's really healthy. And everybody says that that's healthy. And she was like, well, actually you're damp, you have this dampness in your body. And of course, Chinese medicine has its own its own words for everything, but just do that and see how you feel. And so I literally have not, I used to eat a couple salads a day. I haven't had a salad in 2 months and I have lost weight. I haven't made myself a green juice and I have lost weight. And I'm like, and I've been eating some grains too. And feeling really good eating like, and I'm not even living in a super cold environment. I live in Maui. I live in a wetter part of Maui, but I was sort of dumbfounded that, and they just said, your digestive fire is not really strong enough to be able to handle all of this raw food was basically it. And so I just find myself frequently still shaking my head. And I know that maybe I obsess about it, maybe a little bit too much, and the obsession can cause problems. And it's about more than just diet. But what I loved about, so when I did I already had my 23andMe results. I plugged all that in and it confirmed that I should be on a lower fat diet using, you called it the foundation diet. And that was, relying
the Mediterranean. It's a Mediterranean diet adapted with a lower fruit content.
Right. Which makes sense. And, also, that is where my family is from, or at least one part of my family is. I'm all of European lineage. I know that I'm partially Greek. I think the Mediterranean diet includes dairy, though, and dairy and meat are not friends.
And that could be
much as I would love, I could just change that. That is what is true for me.
Well, and the big thing is that those cultures have a lot of fermented foods. And so I think that's something that we really forget about, especially if you have that FUT2 gene, because that is going to bring a lot of bifidobacteria. It's going to help that diversity. And a lot of the fermented foods, you have a tremendous amount of bifidobacteria in there, and then also the lactobacillus. And so I think we often forget that within the Mediterranean culture, fermented foods play a huge role. Fermented dairy as well. So they're constantly getting these different inputs of fermented foods, which are going to then allow us to break down the dairy better.
Yes, and I have been focusing more and more on. I like fermented foods, but it's not always I don't always have them on hand. But I am working to just eat some at every meal. But yeah, oh my gosh, there's so many things. But that was just really, it was just really good to see that and that it just makes sense. So yeah. Okay. So I'm just thinking about all of my questions for myself, but we're just going to shelf that.
Well, so another thing I think to kind of jump in about is that fasting is really an element of our society that we just don't do anymore. And if you think about the paleo diet really follows this element of hunter-gatherers.
Yes.
But you didn't have abundance during that time. And so there were times of feast and famine. And when there was famine or there wasn't the same abundance, then you would end up fasting for periods of time. And when you fast, you do a lot of resetting as well. So oftentimes winters is a great time to do that, because now you're going to help lower your blood sugar, become more insulin sensitive, more leptin sensitive as well. And so for a lot of people who have those markers, those genetic markers that maybe you're going to have an elevated blood sugar or tend towards metabolic syndrome, that's a great way to do it. Because during the hunter-gatherer times, it's not as if there's a steak sitting at every corner that you can just go grab.
Right.
And sometimes you would go 3 or 4 days without any meat.
Right.
So I think that's where the challenge is, that we do want to eliminate the processed foods. But then what we want to think about is, well, if I eat sweet potatoes for 3 days and no protein, that's okay. Mm-hmm. And then I'll have protein a couple days later. And this was so powerful for us. So we really embraced the paleo diet when our daughter was young. And we said, we're not going to do the goldfish, we're not doing the crackers, we're not doing the puffed rice cereal, but we're going to do protein. And we ended up with an element of precocious puberty, and her insulin growth factor was through the roof. And I was trying to figure out, I said, what have we done? You know, we limited the sugar, we did all of these things, but too much protein turns into sugar.
Right.
So we cut her protein way back. We let her have more carbs, more sweet potatoes. We didn't look at it as much, and she ended up losing weight. And she wasn't even super overweight, but she was just, you know, you could tell where she was trending. Right. She ended up losing 10 pounds.
At what age was this?
12.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, you know, she was heading into puberty, so it's a whole nother thing. But it was just so fascinating. And then she would say, well, is there protein with this meal? And I said, no. Oh, what am I going to do without my protein? And I said, it's okay. You can have a protein-free meal and give your body that break.
Yes, I've actually found for myself that that limiting my it's so easy when you start paleo. That's typically what you do. You start paleo, you cut out the carbs, you replace it with protein. I did it. Exactly. Most everybody does it. I teach now. One of the first main articles I ever had published was how to avoid the paleo traps, in like the top 5 paleo traps. And the first was eating too much protein, because it's what everybody does when they start paleo. I know for myself now that this is sort of gross, but the way that I know I'm eating too much protein is I just start to smell bad.
And that's a common complaint.
Yeah. And so like even earlier, I noticed I was eating with my son, I was eating these little chicken breakfast sausages almost every morning with him. It wasn't even a lot. They were pretty small. But after like 3 days of doing that in a row, I was like, ooh, I think I need to cut back on the protein. And I really actually do better if I just eat animal protein maybe like 2 or 3 times a week, and make sure that I eat a lot of vegetables. My body seems to be fine with shock. I just ate like fried rice with quinoa and vegetables and a little bit of salmon, but I'm so over I don't want to confuse people, which is why I sometimes hesitate to share all this stuff, because people who are coming into my community, they're just trying to get off the junk food. So if you're just trying to get off the junk food, then just stick to the paleo principles. But as you go on, like considering that too much protein leads to a big word, gluconeogenesis, yes.
Big mouthful.
I'm actually happy that I mostly remembered that. And that you can, and depending on the person, I know that too much protein, beyond it not being very sustainable for our planet, can be very hard for some people to process, some more than others. And we have to remember to eat a lot of
inflammatory too. And it can be inflammatory as well. And so that's another thing. So if you have some genetic markers that are going to predispose you towards inflammation, then that's going to be an area. Then you want to dial that back. Or if you have any inflammatory conditions too, or your weight's plateaued as well, that's another option. It's just, and you just try, maybe a protein-free day a week. And Walter Longo out of USC has done a lot of research about that, just looking at when you have that absence of protein, it acts like caloric restriction. It's really interesting.
Okay, I've never conscientiously done that. I've just pulled my meat consumption way back and have personally felt better. Let me get some rough numbers on, I don't know if you have the answer to this, but roughly what percentage of our population would do well with a keto type diet?
It's about 10%, 10 to 15%, because if we're looking at the main gene that is really responsible for cholesterol transport, which is it's called the ApoE, apolipoprotein is what it is.
Yep.
So there's about 25% of the population that really doesn't do well with any saturated fat, very few animal products. Okay. Then you get the big bulk of the people in the middle, which are going to do well with the mix. And then you've got the other group, which are the twos, and they really need a high fat diet. Those are the people that really excel on that.
Okay, so when we see all of these people, because this is how it is in our society nowadays, and in this health world with all of the, the bloggers who are now experts, when we see the people who have had these amazing dramatic results.
Yes.
Do you think, and I'm not just saying for keto, I'm talking about raw vegan or, whatever there's these extreme macronutrient restriction.
Right.
Those people just happen to probably hit the right diet for their genetics?
Possibly. Or again, when you do some of these therapeutic interventions, I would say that anything that kind of goes in one extreme or the other is it's like what we would call in the medical community a therapeutic intervention. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that usually it's not after a couple of years, then the body starts saying we need to change something up. So a lot of times with people with keto, they start getting a leaky gut because they don't have the carbs to create the mucus lining. Right. Raw vegans start having nutrient deficiencies. They start losing enzymes to break down protein. So it really, to me, I think if you have a specific goal in mind, some of these diets can be really helpful. But if you're thinking a long-term sustainable, then it's going to be some intermittent fasting. It's going to be eating seasonally. And so in the winter, that's probably going to mean no fruit. Right. You're going to keep that protein kind of at the back of your mind and say, gosh, if I've had it a bunch of days in a row, I'm going to take a day or two off. Right. And then lots of plant-based veggies, lots of veggies, and then some of the starches. Right. And I'm sorry. And then depending on how you manipulate that to you, that's kind of like that foundation. Right. And, so maybe you're pregnant or you're nursing, so you're going to up your protein, you're going to up your carbs. Right. You adjust it. Right. So I had another quick question. So what percentage of people actually then fall more in the balanced macronutrient area? Most. Yeah. It's more than 50% of the population. And again, I'm focusing on one particular gene because then there's some other genes as well that are going to impact your carbohydrate metabolism and how you handle them. Mm-hmm. Because, for example, there is another aspect of genetics, which is how many copies of the gene do you have? So right now, when you get the Toolbox report, it's the gene, here's what you have, and here's how it interacts. But sometimes you can have multiple copies of it. So your ability to handle starch is actually what we call a copy number variant. So Asians have more copies of the amylase gene. So they can handle rice better than we can. Right. So it's one of the explanations actually of how dogs evolved from wolves. So dogs developed more copies of the amylase genes. They could handle starches, and they began hanging out with humans. Wolves don't have that option. And so if you look at them, they're pretty much a carnivorous diet. Right. They're not as carnivorous as cats, but still. And so there are these other little aspects of it as far as that we do have to start overlaying. But when we're looking at kind of the grand population, yes, for most people, it is a mixed diet. Mm-hmm. But if you are having troubles with blood sugar regulation or insulin levels, and especially if you've got genes that are going to kind of really predispose you even more, then you have to be more conscientious about the types of carbs that you choose or the amount that you eat. Right. And then maybe doing something more extreme as a reset. And as your body resets, begins to experience its benefits, then reevaluating to see if you want to go back to, once your body has done some of that healing, going back to a more moderate approach. Exactly. That makes a lot of sense because it's sort of then, it definitely explains why, there are a lot of people who heal cancers and whatnot from doing a raw vegan diet or from doing, extreme juicing. Many of the people who are most active in my community have a handful, most of them, of chronic illnesses. Mm-hmm. And they are coming to paleo in their, it's most of my audience is like women 40 to 65 who have learned about paleo because they are, they're dealing with something pretty extreme. And so why is it then, I think that I know the answer to this, but, with paleo, it is a misconception that paleo is necessarily
low carb because there are lots of, different fruits and sweet potatoes and squashes and all of that you can eat on paleo. But why do people feel so much better not eating the grains when they start doing paleo?
So it's usually a combination of events, but for a lot of people, the first thing that they remove is the gluten. And so the gluten ends up becoming, it's an irritant to your gut. And if you don't have the gut bacteria to break it down, now you've got these tight junctions. They should be super tight like this. And then they get leaky, and then things go in and out.
Yeah.
And now you're going to start affecting other parts of your body or your organs. Yeah. And then you have something called lectins. And lectins are another really hot topic right now. They're called, quote unquote, plant poisons. The best lectin that everyone points to is the castor bean. And it's a thing that plants have to prevent predators from eating them.
Yes.
And so they don't taste good. And we figured out ways to break down lectins. But I think
soaking, sprouting, fermenting, all of that.
Exactly. Pressure cookers, all of that.
Right.
But I really think that there are a lot of gut bugs that we don't know that much about the microbiome yet. But those are probably the ones that are going to help break it down. So another great point that people talk about is the oxalate diet. They go off of oxalates, right? Because oxalates are essentially this crystalline product that gets formed with certain foods, and they bind to calcium, and it's very painful. So it affects joints. They can have a lot of pain, and so people go on an oxalate-free diet. Well, what's in oxalates are in a lot of green vegetables, especially spinach. Chocolate is another common one, and so then people despair. But you actually have a bacteria that helps break down oxalates. So my theory is that sometimes some of these struggles that we have with our diet, it's because we're not actually feeding these other gut bugs that we have that really are going to allow us some of that latitude that we think we should have. And it makes sense. And we couldn't, evolutionarily speaking, say, oh, that's a lectin, that's not good for me, that's bad for me. We had to say, okay, this is what I have available to me. I need to figure out how to cook it and eat it so I can survive.
Right.
And, and we've gotten so concerned about being so clean, whether it's we're constantly using antibacterial soap, using antibiotics. And so just being really mindful that we have a whole nother colony in our gut that is going to play a huge role. And we have bugs in our gut that actually will make folate, they'll make riboflavin, they have special transporters, they make biotin. I mean, so a lot of times the nutrients that we feel we have to take in or the supplements we have to take in, our body's all set to make it for us, but we just need the right bugs.
Right. Okay. So I haven't said this for a while, but for those of you who are just joining this amazing, mind-blowing, my favorite conversation in the history of the world, I am joined by Dr. Erika Gray, and we are talking all about what your genetics have to do with determining what diet you should be eating. If you are joining us live, say hello in the comments. If you have any questions, I actually think that I might be having some questions. Let me check. And just let us know where you're writing in from. Okay, Sandy, do you have a question? She might not have a question. She might just be telling us things. Okay, Sandy, if you have a question that goes along with that comment, let me know. Okay, so let's just, since we're talking about this, and this makes so much sense, let's just remind everybody how we diversify and feed the good bacteria. I have some of my own theories, and I would love to hear from you beyond. We talked about fermented foods in general, but are there some that are better than others, or what do you think are the best things to feed and diversify the microbiome?
Ooh. I think you have to play with it, because so there's kimchi and natto for the Asian communities. I grew up with sauerkraut. Other cultures grow up with kefir. So I think that's where sometimes it's a great conversation to have with your family members and say, what did grandma make? What was the fermented food that we had? Because that's going to give you some good insight as to where you grew up, or where you came from genetically.
Right.
Because that's going to influence what types of bugs you were surrounded by and which ones you nurtured. I mean, we try to do things like kefir, or you can make water kefir. You can make the probiotic lemonade. You can do kombucha, or sauerkraut is another great option as well.
What do you think about the prebiotic foods and this whole thing about? I've gotten so fascinated by eating cooked cold potatoes
the resistant starch.
Yeah, the resistant starches, and how that specifically feeds your lower gut bacteria, right?
Yes, versus the higher, exactly. So it's more in the colon.
So please, whatever you say, tell me that eating potato salad with my good mayo is a superfood, because I love my potato salad.
I would say if your blood sugar can handle it and you don't have any aches and pains, then eat it a couple times a week, because you're absolutely right. So we've talked a lot about how important it is to have probiotics. But we need to also think about what feeds those probiotics. And so the things that feed those probiotics are the prebiotics. And so that's where the starches really come into place and are really important, because the bacteria ferment those, and that becomes the nourishment for the bacteria. And so that's where the whole thing about this resistant starch movement has come about. There's been a lot of talk about green banana flour, green plantains are a good option.
I like using those.
Yes. Inulin is another one that's very common in things like jicama and also sunchokes.
Okay.
Now, here's the interesting thing, is that these prebiotics will selectively feed certain bacteria. And you will know if those bacteria are being fed, because sometimes it is going to be the most powerful gas that you will experience. And if you have young children, they think it's great because they're getting jet propelled around the house.
So that's a sign that your body is not doing so well in the processing.
It means you need some more gut diversity, because you're feeding a certain type of bacteria that is fermenting this resistant starch and is causing the gas. You should not, as a general rule, have gas. You should not be embarrassed to go out in public. Right. And so what will end up happening is that you need to make sure that you introduce some additional diversity into your probiotics to help manage that.
Right. So kefirs and good quality yogurt, if you can tolerate the dairy, and kimchi and sauerkraut, and
then probiotics.
My 2-year-old loves kombucha. Like, he has a love affair with kombucha. So probiotics, I have mixed things. I've been hearing some mixed things about it. Oh,
here, we're going to get on the probiotics.
I think we're having a delay. Shoot.
Oh, I'm going to. I've got to grab my charger. Hold on 1 second.
Okay. Yes, somebody mentioned that I'm a bit echoey. Am I echoey to you?
Yes, I can hear myself a little bit. Now it's fine.
Okay. Yeah, if your computer was dying, maybe that had something to do with it. What were we just saying? Oh, we were talking about about probiotics.
Right.
And I have not been taking probiotics because I've been reading all of this conflicting information that it's probably not doing anything for you, and your stomach acid's killing it. It's not getting where it's supposed to be. And I'm like, okay, I'll just eat it in the food.
Well, so here's an interesting thing that I've discovered. Usually people don't take enough probiotics. That's problem number one.
Really? Every single one has 8 trillion zillion of them in it.
So I got turned on to this type of probiotic called Equilibrium, and it's 100 billion per capsule. And I took 8 at a time. That's 800 billion.
800 billion? Were they crawling out of your ears?
No, but I had a clear nose, and my stomach got flatter, and I felt like I had more flexibility in what I ate, and that's what really got me onto that trajectory of maybe the problem lies with our gut biome in terms of, all these people say, I can't eat this, I can't eat that, I'm allergic to this, I'm breaking out, I have eczema. Well, but a lot of that is coming from our gut. And again, if you don't have the genes that help you with that diversity, or they're kind of working against you and we're not supporting them, then it's going to make it that much harder. But the other thing that's fascinating is that riboflavin is the classic B vitamin that turns your urine yellow. So when you take your multi or your B vitamin, you'll see it very quickly. I was not taking any B vitamins, and yet my urine was yellow. So I said, okay. So then I went back into the literature, and sure enough, there's all of these different bacterial strains of bifido that make riboflavin. So to me, that said, I was feeding enough of that bacteria that was making riboflavin.
After you started the probiotics, without the B vitamins, it was yellow.
Exactly.
Okay. That's cool.
So that was kind of my aha moment of, okay, so if you feed enough of them and you're feeding them the right strains, then you might actually be really supporting that whole area. And you should be able to have more latitude in what you eat. So if you have some dairy, you have a clear nose, you don't have gas, you don't have bloating. If you have gluten occasionally, as long as you're not celiacs.
I should not be here. Anytime people start telling me this, it then gives me permission to start doing these things. And then I want to eat grilled cheese at every meal, and it's not a good idea.
That's not a good idea, yeah. But we know that. That's also the beauty of the testing that we have, is there are certain areas that we just have to stay away from for ourselves.
Well, your test actually told me that I was probably not lactose or gluten intolerant. So you did just open that door back up for me. Even though I can tell you from experience that my body is not typically, I can do small amounts. But the problem for me is because I like the taste so much that as soon as I get the taste back in my mouth, I just think about it and I want it all the time.
Yes. And so that's the other aspect of it, is that it's really important for people to realize you have certain genes, they may or may not be turned on. And sometimes if you eat too much of a certain food and it's inflammatory to you, then you're still going to have a reaction.
Right.
So just because you don't have the gluten and dairy gene doesn't mean that you get carte blanche, because there's other genes that we're finding that actually play a role with the non-gluten sensitivity. Non-celiac gluten sensitivity. Right. Exactly. So right now,
and we're coming from a place of, if we were living in this world where there was no stress and there were no environmental toxins, and it was simply a matter of, we all come from different parts of the globe and we have inherited this and that's it, then it would be a much cleaner conversation also than all of the things that our bodies have been exposed to that have really weighed us down, that then requires us to maybe eat more strictly, eliminate certain macronutrients for periods of time to undo the damages of the modern world.
Right. Well, and the other aspect of it is that so many people say, well, as long as that, everything in moderation. Well, your brain is telling you what is it in moderation, but maybe your genes tell a completely different story. And so there's that disconnect. And so then you do all of these things, or you indulge in certain behaviors or lifestyles, which are just going to make it that much harder for your body to get back on track. And so as a result, you have to be stricter with what you do.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so 2 immediate questions that are coming to my mind. One is just about the probiotics. You said that you like this Equilibrium brand. Have you heard of the soil-based probiotics, or like the spore ones?
Megaspore, Prescripticis.
I've taken Megaspore before. I actually didn't feel any different when I took it. I took it for a while and was like, okay, this is cool. but
But
I
did
stopped
your
taking it.
micronutrient test change?
I don't know. I didn't test one before the other.
So that's been the common thing that I hear about Megaspore. I don't feel a difference, but when you look at the micronutrient test, you see that they do really well. Their vitamin A levels are up, their CoQ10 is up, their lutein is up. So a lot of those carotenoids and those really great, I'm blanking on the name of them, those go up because that particular spore-based bacteria feeds those bacteria that can make those.
Okay, so then do you recommend, right, so then do you recommend taking multiple different kinds of probiotics, or how do you then find the probiotic that does better for your body?
So I think you have to rotate them because that's what you would do naturally. You wouldn't just be getting the exact same strains over and over again.
Right.
I think you have to find which probiotic you notice a difference. And again, it may be that you do have to go up on the dose to see the effect, because there's great probiotics out there, but people just take one capsule, but they'll see the effect at 4 or 5 capsules. And then rotate it. Take a week off. Do Megaspore, do that for 2 weeks, and then take Prescript Assist, and maybe just do a lactobacillus variety for a couple weeks too, or you can overlay it. And I know that's not very satisfying because people want a script, so to speak, of what to do.
That's okay.
But when you will know when that probiotic is ideally working for you, because again, a lot of the allergies that people experience, or the food intolerances, or the GI distress, those are kind of like your benchmarks that you can look at to see if they're improving or not.
Right. Another thing, just on that whole, on the microbiome and the bacteria conversation. So my 2-year-old has his teeth started rotting. His front 2 teeth are rotted out. It's so sad. Aww. This happened before he had ever had any food. He had only had breast milk. He's never been vaccinated. He's never had antibiotics. And I wasn't brushing his teeth it didn't even occur to me that I needed to brush his teeth when all he'd ever had was breast milk. And now since then we're taking a much more aggressive approach, which includes he gets some little dental probiotics now. But there's a whole thing, the mouth microbiome is different, right?
Right. And so that's another big area, is that sometimes you have more what we would call pathogenic bacteria in your mouth. And so that's actually going to promote the development of cavities or for plaque as well. And there's been some really interesting things where there are some children and they have genes for this, they call the sweet receptor.
So I think I have that.
Yes.
Which means that you really want to eat sweet food.
You do.
Yeah.
And you can also you have a higher predisposition to cavities. So a lot of times, that's why when you will swish with different antibacterials, whether it's colloidal silver or sea salt, you're actually changing the mouth microbiome. And so that's why a lot of times people will have success in preventing cavities, because of the different products that you can utilize to change the mouth microbiome.
Yeah, I've been trying all kinds of different things. It's interesting because he doesn't eat any sugar, actually. So I've been giving him this, the blue fermented cod liver oil.
Oh yeah.
But what 2-year-old wants to eat fermented cod liver oil? Zero of them is the answer.
But if you get them used to it.
Well, so what I've been doing, I got the cream because chocolate fermented cod liver oil cream that I have been encasing in a little bit of chocolate. And he will eat it. I would love to find a xylitol sweetened chocolate. Haven't found that yet. So that seems to be helping, but I feel like I'm just shooting from the hip. I'm like, okay, take this probiotic, okay, do this. And now we're going to rinse your mouth with this. And oh my God, I don't want all your teeth to fall out. And it's just been a really harrowing journey for me because he is so healthy in like developmentally is healthy. He's incredibly smart, but it's really questioned, like, is my kid really not as healthy as I think that he is? I mean, given that he has these 2 teeth that have fallen out, it's been like the biggest parent struggle we've had.
Oh, understandably. And I think you have things like D3 and K2 can be really important for oral health as well.
Yep, all of those are in that fermented cod liver oil. And then he's taking another little supplement. And then there's some strands of probiotics. M18, I think, is one of them that he's been taking. But man, that kid loves sweet food. He will eat basically meat and fruit and breast milk is all, and some sort of chocolate if I give it to him. He would eat that all day long.
Well, children also inherently, because breast milk is really sweet, they are much more inclined towards sweet things. So it's like a general evolution. And then as we get older, then we will genetically, we have the genes, we don't mind bitter flavors. But your tastes definitely do change when you get older. Sour foods really peak in the teen years. And then some people are super tasty.
Oh, that's funny. Is that why teenagers like to chew on lemons?
Probably. Or so Sour weird. Patch Kids or Warheads. I mean, I remember that as a teenager and thinking, this is delicious. And but so those genes for your taste receptors definitely also play into it as well. And if you're a super taster, this whole world opens up to you. But in the same token, it can be very limiting because you go, I can't stand that, or that doesn't taste good.
Wait, so what's a super taster? I wonder if I'm a super taster.
So it's this main. There's 3 genes that comprise this particular taste ability, and so either you're a taster, they call them a taster, or not a taster. So the ones and then there's the in between as well. But the super tasters will often say, I don't like spicy, I don't like bitter, I don't like Brussels sprouts.
Oh, then I'm the opposite of that. That's probably Craig.
Or there's the other ones where you can't taste it. And so if you can't taste bitter, like I love broccoli, I love cauliflower, raw, cooked, steamed, doesn't matter. And then meanwhile, there's other people like, can't stand it. And so that boils down to these genes, and then it will dictate, do you have an increased density of taste buds or decreased density? So the more taste buds you have, the more you can taste. And then you'll have these other genes that interact with it as well, and they'll amplify the bitter flavor or downplay it as well. So that's the next thing we're working on right now. We're doing a taste panel for people to help them understand how they can eat better.
I love most of the taste. I wish I liked liver more than I like, but maybe I'm the opposite of super taster then. I don't know. But I'm able to distinguish the taste of almost anything. Like maybe that's just because I've been a chef. Like you could blindfold me and give me a spoon of something, and I can typically pull out
tell you what it is,
what the ingredients are. And that might be more just a function of practice, but
that and your mind, you also teach yourself, broccoli is really good for me, therefore I'm going to work on it, and I'm going to like it because it's so good for me. So that is the other aspect of it that comes in, is that this is where you are fundamentally, but you can impact how you like it.
Right. That makes sense. And because how we think about things and how we feel about them changes everything. That's why the placebo effect is so real.
Exactly. And for some people, if you just had an adverse reaction to something, you will never touch that food potentially again.
Right. Ever again.
Because it's so visceral. Right. Or if you had a particular food that you just have this great memory associated with it, then you may want to always recreate that memory by eating that particular food, even if it really doesn't match with anything for you genetically, but you just happen to have this great association.
Right. Okay, so I have to go back to the whole thing about the Mediterranean diet and most people doing better in this middle ground. Would you say, is this accurate that the Mediterranean diet has been the most studied and shown the most positive health benefits for the most people over time. Is that a true statement in terms of like scientific evidence?
But again, for Europeans, I would hesitate to take that and extrapolate that to Asians or Indians, or Africans.
African Americans, right? But because probably most of the research is being done by white people of European history or heritage.
Well, there's that. And then also when you get a lot of people who move to more industrialized nations, they often adapt a Western diet. And so therefore, even putting them on a Mediterranean diet where maybe genetically it's not optimal for them, when you remove those processed foods and you remove the trans fats and you eat more anti-inflammatory foods, you're going to get a benefit as well.
Right.
So I think that's why just kind of across the spectrum, you see the most benefit. But you can dial it in further.
Right, totally. So I have one last question. I think we probably need to wrap up. Why is it that for some people who are who are prone to diabetes or are diabetic, pre-diabetic, or just having problems with blood sugar in general, may take the carbs out and still have such issues with their blood sugar? Is that genetic?
It could be genetic, but I bet they've done two things. They still are eating fruit or too much protein.
Right.
Yes. Okay. So oftentimes for people like that, that's where fasting, some intermittent fasting can come into play as well. And
I found this app, and it was helping me. I was doing a fasting. It was basically like mostly just like eating when the sun is up.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't remember what the app was called. I'll put it in the comments when I can find it. But that made a lot of sense to me. That certainly hunter-gatherers, for the most part, were probably eating when it was light.
Right.
But do you recommend intermittent fasting across the board? Or are there some people that it works for and some people that it doesn't work for?
So of course, if you're pregnant, nursing, child, you're growing, I would say no. Other than that, unless you are on specific medications too, because sometimes those will lower your blood sugar too much, or you're on insulin, so there you don't fast unless you're working with a healthcare professional. But as long as you're not, taking those breaks from food can be tremendously beneficial in really kind of helping the body go through its own cleanse, doing something called autophagy, which is it's similar to apoptosis. There's programmed cell death, and then there's kind of just getting rid of all of the junk. And so that happens under that fasting umbrella.
Okay, so what are for someone who's maybe never fasted before, what would be a protocol that works well for most people, especially a beginner?
Stop eating after 6 p.m.
After 6 p.m. And then don't eat for 14 hours? 14
hours.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty close to probably what I was doing. The app was really cool. It was very simple. And the thing that I love to do is after my son goes to sleep at night, I love to snack.
Yes, and that's a really common thing. And the later you stay up, the more you'll snack. You're just at a point of decision-making fatigue. So you go, well, fine, I'll just have that, because it's easier to say yes than no and fight and deal with your willpower at the end of the day.
That is so true. Man, that is true. I'm going to start doing that again, even though I got to stop breastfeeding my kid. He's 2.5. He seems to want to go forever. We have done night weaning, but there's all of these really great things I want to do that they all seem contraindicated to breastfeeding.
He'll stop. Trust me. They go for a while, and then
I am telling you, given if it was up to him, he would be doing it well into the teen years. It's pretty ridiculous. Okay, so I do have a question from Sandy OB. She said, "What probiotics are best to start with if you've never done probiotics?"
I would say either Equilibrium Prescript Assist or Megaspore. I mean, those are 3 great ones out there that you can choose from. You can get them all on Amazon.
Yep, I can put some links to that for you guys. And then, man, I feel like we've covered so much today. And I know I'm going to get off of it and be like, oh, wait, I forgot these other 107 questions. But
That's is there part 2.
Is there anything else that you wanted to cover that we didn't get to today?
I think really just kind of going back to where we started about, you had put this question on a Facebook group that we're in about diets. Mm-hmm. And I think it doesn't need to be as polarizing as we make it out to be. I mean, we are all unique individuals, and genetically we're all unique. And without having that other part of us, it's really easy to make kind of blanket statements. But I think it's important to remember that, as I said, there wasn't a steak on every corner. You had to work for your food. There were times that you didn't have food, and kind of embracing the seasons, and being more mindful that the food you put in or the way you live your life is going to be either supporting your genes or it's going to be working against them. And so we really want to support them as much as possible.
Right. And so to get all of the amazing information like that I got in my Toolbox Genomics report, you need your 23andMe or your Ancestry results. Is that
correct?
That's
correct. So just for the moment, and then hopefully within the next couple months, we will have our own testing kits.
Oh,
so
sweet.
You will be able to just go onto our website and order it, and then pick what report you want to see. So whether it's nutrition, whether it's weight loss, whether it's fitness, those will all be available.
Okay, so you actually then order different kits, and that blood is analyzed differently based upon the outcome you want?
So 1 kit, 1 swab, multiple reports.
Got it.
You can pick and choose.
Well, you can order one, maybe order another one later.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So look for that in the next couple months.
That's so awesome. Man, so if you have your 23andMe results, please run, don't walk to get them analyzed in Toolbox Genomics. It is beyond that, because I've built websites and done this stuff before. It is beautiful. You guys did such a good job just with the whole user experience and taking all of this really complex information and synthesizing it into something that is really easy to just read through and have it make sense. So kudos for you on that.
So thank you. That means a lot. Those are number one thing that we wanted. We wanted it to be friendly and accessible.
It is.
So that
it's beautiful.
You do.
Yeah, no, it's really beautiful. I've had my 23andMe results for over a year, and the information you get just from 23andMe, for me, it was I don't care. Just what they gave me. And I tried a couple different things, and I don't know if I just couldn't understand what it was telling me. I don't know. I just did not have any success. And then I came to your website and I just hit one button that said, yes, you can use my 23andMe results. And all of a sudden I had a beautiful report, and it confirmed some things. It clarified some other things. I've been my own health detective for so many years that it was just so great to read that stuff. So I'm super excited to see how you guys continue to grow, and it's great. It really is. The link to learn more about Toolbox Genomics is right there in the description. Yeah. I will add some links for some probiotics, and I'll also add the link for that app to help you with your intermittent fasting. Because it did help me a lot, and I am motivated to do it again. And now I'm going to go
latitude. It's a great tool to have. Really.
Yeah. Is. And I'm going to go, spend, several $100s on probiotics now. I'm so excited. Well, this was an excellent conversation. Highlight of my year so far. Oh. And thank you for the work that you're doing. It's so important. I love it.
Well, thank you for having me. This is a lot of fun.
Yes.
Great topic to discuss.
Yes, I'll have to bring you back again after I get off and have, my list of 15 more questions. And I hope that this brings clarity and not more confusion to all of you, my paleo people. Paleo is a great jumping off point. If you're just in the place of trying to get the junk out of your diet, then let that be what you do. But please do keep this conversation in the back of your mind as you continue to tweak and fine tune to help you get to the next level. And then when you're ready, certainly invest in the testing that will allow you to get your genomics toolbox report, and it will definitely give you some really interesting information about yourself. So that is what we have for today. All of the links are in the description, and we will see you next Tuesday, 1:00 Pacific. I'll be cooking something delicious, and on Thursday, I'm going to be interviewing my good friend here on Maui, Lindsay. She has been healing her son's autism or the symptoms of his autism for the last 4 or 5 years. And their journey is extraordinary. The progress this little boy has made with her nutritional and supplement changes is like, wow, it's so powerful. Oh, we didn't talk about MTHFR. Next time. I know we're like so over. I knew there was something else, but that is another really interesting topic to me. But anyway, so Thursday we are going to be talking with Lindsay, and she's going to share the most inspirational journey that she is on healing her son's autism. I think you're going to love it. Erika, Dr. Erika, thank you. You're amazing.
Thanks, Camille.
I can't wait for the next time. Bye.
Me too. Bye.